Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Growing Positive Traffic Safety Culture, Changing Beliefs to Support Safer Behaviors, brought to you by the Transportation Learning Network, TLN, and the Commercial Vehicle Safety Center, CVSC. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the TLN and CVSC team, whose hard work behind the scenes make these sessions possible, from coordinating logistics to managing technology and support. Their efforts ensure that we can deliver high-quality training and resources to you. TLN is a program of the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute at North Dakota State University. We are a dynamic partnership with the four state DOTs of North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. Along with CTIPs, and through these partnerships, TLN delivers technical transfer, best practices, training, and research to the transportation industry. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brenda.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and greetings to everyone. It's nice to see so many attendees on our meeting today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. And thanks as well to our speaker for today, Dr. Carrie Finley, as well as thanks to the staff of TLN for all their help in coordinating this meeting. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration for the grant funding that makes our work and these webinars possible. As Chris mentioned, my name is Brenda Lance, and I'm Associate Director of UGPTI, as well as the Program Director for our Commercial Vehicle Safety Center. So our center conducts safety research and is also a point of contact for agencies seeking assistance to help establish partnerships, whether it be with other agencies, with industry, with universities, to help improve commercial vehicle safety. So we're excited to have you join us today. The webinar today is going to help you discover how beliefs shape driving behaviors, and you'll also learn some strategies for changing traffic safety culture as well as addressing risky driving behaviors. Suggestions for topics for future webinars are always welcome, so if anything comes to mind either during this webinar or at a later time, feel free to contact me. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Carrie Finley is a research scholar and director for the Center for Health and Safety Culture at Montana State University. So Carrie, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited to spend time with you thinking about your work in traffic safety. Just a little bit of background. I'm the director for the Center for Health and Safety Culture at Montana State University, and I'm also a researcher. So we're an interdisciplinary center that conducts research on how culture impacts health and safety. We conduct applied research, all in partnerships with communities, states, tribal, and national organizations who are seeking to make a difference to improve health and safety. All of the research that we do is applied with folks trying to make a difference in their communities. And while we work on a variety of different health and safety issues, traffic safety is one of our core focus areas for our team. So I'm going to dive right in this morning, and I hope that our time together this morning is to really think about growing positive traffic safety culture and how changing beliefs can support safer behaviors. And I hope that from our time today that you'll perhaps start to think about your work in a slightly different way, or maybe you'll have an aha moment that shifts how you approach the work that you're doing in your communities. I know we're not together very long, so I'm going to dive right in. You might have heard of this saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. This is a quote by Lewis Carroll that I think is often used to drive home this idea that we have to know where we're headed in our work. We need a clear understanding of our why. Why are we working to make vehicles safer? Why are we working to reduce aggressive driving? Think about that in your context. What's your why? Now, others like Stephen Covey, he coined the saying, begin with the end in mind. And I think that conveyed a similar sentiment. To be effective in our work, we need to know where we're headed, where we're going. And I think this can offer us an opportunity to reflect on our work, on the activities that we do, and whether those activities are really aligned with our goals of where we want to be. So with that in mind, we're going to start our conversation today with this notion of beginning with the end in mind, or knowing where we're headed. So I want to start with these three questions. What are the consequences associated with traffic safety that we're trying to address or change? What are the behaviors that lead to these consequences? And what are the beliefs that support these behaviors? Now, if we think about consequences first, consequences are those outcomes. They're not behaviors and they're not beliefs, but they're outcomes. Now, you might be thinking about things in traffic safety like serious deaths and injuries, or pain and trauma, damages, costs, financial impacts. These are all consequences or outcomes of our behaviors. What are the behaviors that lead to these consequences? So you might be thinking about things that we focus on traffic safety in traffic safety every day. You might be thinking of behaviors like speeding, or not wearing your seatbelt, or distracted driving. You might also be thinking about behaviors that go beyond the road user. What about stakeholders? What are some of the behaviors of stakeholders? You might be thinking about things like vehicle designs, engineers making decisions about road design, parents making family rules for their novice teen drivers. We can think about a wide range of behaviors beyond just the road user that impacts those consequences. Behaviors are things that we can observe. And then finally, what are the beliefs that support these behaviors? Now, beliefs are our thoughts, things that we think over and over again. Some examples of beliefs might be things like, it won't happen to me, or I'm an above average driver, or I won't get caught. Now, if we work backwards and we start with the end in mind, we can clearly identify the consequences or outcomes that we want to reduce or eliminate, the risky behaviors that are leading to those consequences, and the beliefs that are supporting these behaviors. To change the negative consequences or outcomes in traffic safety, we know that we're going to have to work to change risky behaviors. And many of our strategies in traffic safety do focus on changing behavior. Behaviors of road users, absolutely, but also behaviors of stakeholders, not just the road users. And we know from research that to change behavior, we need to change beliefs. We need to understand how beliefs are influencing the behaviors we want to change and the behaviors we want to foster and grow. So the main idea in our work to improve traffic safety is that we need to focus on growing beliefs, to shift behaviors, to change those negative outcomes or consequences. In other words, if we're going to change behavior, we know that we need to focus on changing beliefs. And all of the behaviors that we're thinking about, speeding, distraction, not wearing a seatbelt, are all supported by the various beliefs that we have. Now, there are beliefs that we have that support engaging in the protective behaviors that we want. Things like wearing a seatbelt, or not texting and driving, or not drinking, or not driving after drinking. Beliefs that are protective and influence our behaviors in a positive way. We might also have beliefs that support engaging in the risky behaviors that we want to reduce, like not wearing a seatbelt, or speeding, or texting and driving. Beliefs influence our behaviors. So our work then becomes understanding those shared beliefs, growing the protective beliefs people have to shift to safer behaviors that lead to better outcomes and fewer consequences. And the good news is that beliefs are not set in stone. Beliefs can change. Now think about yourself. Think about your 20-year-old self or your 35-year-old self. Think about how your beliefs about something have changed. Maybe your beliefs have changed about your eating or your sleeping habits, or how you take care of your health. Maybe you shifted your beliefs about your work-life balance, or how you spend or save your money. So if beliefs are so important to behavior change, the natural question that comes up is, where do beliefs come from? Reflect on that for a minute. Where do beliefs come from? We might say that our beliefs are based in our culture. Culture is the shared beliefs of a group of people. If we think about culture as the shared beliefs of a group of people that influence behavior, then we can think about culture in the context of traffic safety. Traffic safety culture is the shared beliefs of a group of people that influences road user behaviors and stakeholder actions that impact traffic safety. Now, there's a lot going on in this definition, so I want to break it down just a little bit. First of all, it's a shared belief system of a group of people. And we tend to share beliefs with lots of different groups that we belong to. So let's take, for example, schools and workplaces. Schools and workplaces create groups of people, and each of those groups is defined by a common goal. So, for example, schools have the goal of educating students. And as a school, they're going to establish certain beliefs that support that goal of educating students. Workplaces might have a common goal to, successfully create a certain product or a service. And that workplace will establish certain beliefs to support that goal. Now, beliefs generally relate to our perceptions of what is normal or expected in our social environment. Beliefs influence our willingness and our intention to behave in certain ways. Now, in this definition of traffic safety culture, it's focused on shared beliefs that influence road user behaviors, but also stakeholder actions that influence traffic safety. We want to seek to not only change the traffic safety culture of road users, but also the culture of all stakeholder groups that can act in ways to support our traffic safety goals. This type of thinking, it really expands the responsibility for traffic safety from relying on a single stakeholder group to this idea that it's a shared responsibility amongst all the relevant stakeholders. In research, it is almost unanimously agreed that beliefs deeply affect our actions. And it's interesting to think about. If our work is to grow shared beliefs, grow traffic safety culture, then we need to start thinking through this lens that our work is to influence beliefs of road users and stakeholders. And we can be really intentional about growing a positive traffic safety culture. We can be intentional about selecting strategies that grow supportive beliefs that ultimately influence behaviors that are protective and safer, and that will ultimately change those outcomes or reduce those negative consequences. Okay, so now we're going to move into two specific strategies that we can use in our work to promote belief change, to focus on changing beliefs that can influence traffic safety behaviors. And to do that, we're going to start by talking about how we process information and how we make decisions. So we process information from our environment. We do it all the time. And there are two kind of distinct modes of thinking. Sometimes this is referred to as fast and slow thinking. You might have heard those terms. These two modes of thinking, fast and slow, differ really in the amount of mental effort it takes us to process that information. How much we need to, scrutinize and process information that's coming at us from our environment. Now, fast thinking is just that. It's really fast. It's reactive and it's automatic, and it doesn't take a lot of conscious effort. However, fast thinking can be a little misleading to us too, because if we use fast thinking, we can make mistakes. We use often what we call mental shortcuts, and that can lead us to, it can mislead us in information. Fast thinking is fast because it really doesn't take a lot of mental effort. And as humans, We try to avoid mental effort whenever possible. When possible, we often rely on fast thinking and these mental shortcuts that we've created. Now, in contrast to fast thinking is slow thinking. And slow thinking is really deliberate. It's reflective and it's conscious. Slow thinking is slow because we process the information and it requires greater mental effort from us. Slow thinking takes a little more time, and it allows for a more detailed analysis of the information that's coming in from our environment. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of fast and slow thinking. So let's think about a strategy that we often use now with all of the technology that we have available to us. We use apps. And there's apps that we can put on our phone that will automatically turn our cell phones off or turn them to silent mode when we're driving. And I think that's a really great example that illustrates both fast and slow thinking. So this strategy of using the app engages slow thinking initially, right? It's really deliberate because we have to make a decision to get that app. We have to make a decision. We have to decide what app we're going to use. We have to download it to our phone, and we have to think through it. Like, why do I want this app? Why is that a good decision to have my cell phone go to silent automatically? It's a slow, deliberate thinking process. It's a rational choice that we have to make for ourselves. It can tap into our beliefs about safety and valuing the importance of the driving task itself versus other distractions of getting a text or getting a phone call while we're driving. Now, this strategy, this app, then the strategy also supports fast thinking, right? Because once we have it on our phone, we don't have to go to it again. It just automatically happens. It supports that automatic process where once it's on, we don't have to think about it anymore and it just happens, and we don't need to mentally think about it or keep making the decision to turn that app on. In practice, we can implement strategies in our work that support both fast and slow thinking. And I'd invite you to think for a minute about the strategies that you're using in your work. Which of these require slow, deliberate thinking? Which of those help you to start a conversation or support people in thinking through the behaviors that they are engaging in, at least initially? If our goal is sustained long-term behavior changes that are positive and protective, as we think about intentional behavior change that's long-term, we do want to have components of slow thinking built into our strategies. How are the strategies you're using supporting thoughtful, slow decision-making, at least initially, because that is what taps into the beliefs we have about that behavior. It requires us to think about it for a minute to make a rational decision. We want to ask ourselves, how well does the strategy that I'm implementing foster slow thinking? To move to slow thinking, people need to be able to process information. They need to reflect on their beliefs and make meaning of that new information that they're getting. If we're to change existing beliefs, it does require us to have some element of slow thinking. In other words, people need to pause. They need to reflect on their own behavior and their own existing beliefs. Maybe you have a campaign message that connects to shared beliefs. How are those messages leading to conversations? How are we facilitating those conversations? Maybe it's an educational strategy that you're using that teaches the why behind a traffic safety rule. Parent-teen driver agreements, for example, require conversation, and conversation can move us to slow thinking. Why do I do what I do? What beliefs do I have about that particular behavior? The second strategy to promote belief change and influence our behaviors has to do with emotion. Our beliefs and our emotions are interconnected. Emotions are really powerful, and people often rely on their emotions, either intentionally or unintentionally, to shape their judgments and decisions. Emotions influence both our thoughts and our actions. The emotional center of the brain is highly reactive, which means that as humans, we're very susceptible to language that speaks to our emotions or speaks to our feelings. In a way, emotional appeals almost work by bypassing that logical part of the brain and going straight to our unconscious, straight to our feelings. It's hard to argue with instinct. Emotional appeals work by activating an emotional response that's designed to motivate us, designed to motivate their audience to change our minds or to take action on an issue. Now, the strategies we use to appeal to emotions can go in one of two ways, right? It can appeal to positive emotions or negative emotions. Now, appeals to positive emotions might be things like appealing to our sense of belonging or wanting to belong. It can appeal to our sense of safety, security, comfort, desire, love. There are many strategies that do appeal to our positive emotions. Now, this is an example that I just added. It's an ad that reminds it reminds people about how it feels to receive a letter from a loved one. It feels warm and comforting and activates a positive emotional response in us. Now, appeals can also apply or appeal to our negative emotions. Negative emotions, things like pity, injustice, guilt, shame, fear, or outrage. Now, here's an example of an ad that evokes outrage or fear, and maybe it also appeals to a bit of sadness. It says on this ad, "Child soldiers. It's not happening here, but it's happening now." Think about the emotional response that we get when we see that. Interestingly, in traffic safety, strategies that elicit negative emotions are quite common. We often call these fear-based approaches. Fear-based approaches are really persuasive attempts to arouse fear in us by either emphasizing the potential dangers of something, of engaging in a particular behavior, or the harms of what will happen if a person engages in behavior or chooses not to do what's being recommended. So this example is an example of a mock car crash. It's a fear-based approach that demonstrates the harm and danger of not wearing a seatbelt. It's really meant to arouse fear and persuade and motivate the audience, us, to engage in the protective behavior of wearing a seatbelt. Here's another example. This billboard is a fear-based strategy. It's meant to tap into our fear, where the message clearly identifies the threat and arouses fear, but in this instance, it leaves out what's being recommended or what we want people to do instead. Even though some might say, well, it's really obvious here in this example of what we want people to do. Obviously, we don't want people to drink and drive, but it doesn't say that in this billboard. The formula for fear-based approaches is X is something to fear, therefore Y should be implemented to prevent X. That's the formula. So distracted driving is dangerous, therefore you should stop texting and driving. Or yikes, this is bad, whatever this is that we're promoting, therefore this is what you should do instead of it. Here's what you can do instead. I'm going to show you I'm going to show you a video. And in this video, it's a traffic safety message developed in New Zealand as part of the New Zealand Transport Agency's Road to Zero strategy. And I think it implements a really popular approach that we often use, a fear-based approach in traffic safety. So I want to play that for you now.
It's cool.
What is always in front of you but can't be seen?
What?
The future.
It's a good one. What's going on? Hey, what's this?
A toll.
Okay, how much?
Just the little one today.
Dad.
Fear-based approaches are really popular, and you can start to see, if you notice, you can start to see them all in many different settings, in drug education, in smoking cessation, in dental hygiene, condom use, sedentary lifestyle behaviors. So why do we use fear-based strategies, and why are they so popular? Fear is considered a primary emotion. It's one that all of us, all humans, experience universally. Fear is considered a negative and unpleasant emotion that we as individuals are motivated to get rid of or reduce. We don't like that feeling. And so we are motivated to get rid of it. Fear grabs attention. It's memorable. And the underlying assumption is that if we're the underlying assumption of trying to evoke fear is that when people are emotionally confronted with negative effects of their behavior, they're going to want to change their behavior. That's the underlying assumption of fear-based strategies. So digging into the research, there are some large meta-analyses that have been done, and they've been conducted on using fear and how effective is it. So for example, there was a large meta-analysis that looked at 127 research articles that represented over 27,000 individuals. And they found that fear appeals they were effective to change beliefs, but they were more effective in certain situations than others. So what they found in this very large meta-analysis is that messages that were focused on one-time only behaviors versus repeat behaviors were more effective, were effective when using a fear appeal. So in other words, fear appeals are more effective if they're behaviors that we want people to do one time versus behaviors that we want people to do over and over again. So maybe getting a vaccine, we only want a certain vaccine one time. Maybe a fear-based approach would be more effective than if it's a behavior we want someone to do every time they're in the car, like buckle a seatbelt. Or that we want people to do over time, like exercise, or not drive distracted. This meta-analysis found that fear appeals are more effective with audiences that have a larger percentage of female recipients than males. So they were more effective with females than males. This study also found that evoking fear was more effective if we also describe how to avoid that threat. So what do we want people to do instead of that behavior? And finally, in this study, fear appeals were more effective with issues that were unfamiliar to people than issues that were familiar. So when we know a lot about a particular issue, evoking fear is less effective. Many of us work with young people, and there was a large meta-analysis that examined the impact of fear on driving outcomes specifically. And the results from this study suggested that there was a disconnect between fear and the emotion of fear and the behavior of driving. It found that fear appeals can lead to increased fear arousal, but it did not appear to have the desired impact on the driving behavior. So I think the key question becomes not, are fear-based approaches effective, but what else might work? We know from research that there are a lot of different strategies that can influence people to change beliefs, to change behavior. And since we've been talking about emotions, and we know that beliefs and emotions are interconnected, we don't have to rely solely on eliciting fear. We absolutely can tap in to and appeal to positive emotions too. There's quite a bit of research actually that's explored the use of positive emotions and its effect on behavior, and specifically on reducing risky driving behaviors. Positive emotions include those emotions like joy or empathy, or compassion, or hope. And that's our second strategy to influence beliefs to ultimately change behaviors. Eliciting positive emotions. Positive emotions can be just as effective at changing beliefs, maybe even more effective in some situations, especially with young drivers. We want to ask ourselves when we're thinking about emotions and thinking about the strategies that we're using, we want to ask, how is emotion used in the strategy that I'm using? Strategies that tap into our emotions, they can inspire us and foster feelings of celebration and connection. They can also foster feelings of anxiety and anger and stress. Paying attention to how are we using emotion in our strategies is important because emotions influence beliefs and beliefs influence our behaviors. So while we won't go into details today about how to specifically change beliefs, I hope those two strategies give you some ideas and maybe spark you to want to learn more about ideas to change beliefs in our strategies in traffic safety. Through the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund, which Montana Department of Transportation is the lead agency for this pooled fund, we did a project that really did dive into understanding methods to go about changing beliefs. In this project, we wanted to understand the processes and the conditions that influence belief formation and change. And then we wanted to create a resource and guidance for traffic safety stakeholders in designing effective strategies to change people's beliefs and behaviors related to traffic safety. So we ended up in this project creating a resource, and I put a QR code here to the resource. It's a resource that includes an assessment tool, and it has 11 questions in it that stakeholders can ask themselves as they work to evaluate and enhance their effectiveness of various strategies and countermeasures that they're using in their traffic safety efforts. So the guidance focuses on intentional behaviors, things like distracted driving or not using a seatbelt or driving after drinking alcohol. And It emphasizes the importance of changing specific beliefs that are linked to behaviors, and then ways to go about doing that. So this resource provides suggestions and examples for questions that can help you as practitioners and those working in traffic safety to develop more effective strategies at changing or shifting risky beliefs to more protective beliefs that ultimately can support protective behaviors. So I invite you to scan this QR code if you're interested to check out this assessment resource, or visit Montana Department of Transportation's Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund website. So finally, I thought I'd just give you an example. Knowing that beliefs are important to change behaviors, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes illustrating a project that focuses on changing risky beliefs and growing safer beliefs and behaviors. This project specifically is amongst college students. So we know that drivers involved in fatal crashes and serious injuries are often engaged in multiple risky driving behaviors, like they're not wearing a seatbelt and speeding and driving impaired or distracted. And we wanted to dive in to understand what factors influence multiple risky driving behaviors, and to then explore interventions that could be developed to address multiple risky driving behaviors collectively versus looking at risky driving behaviors in a more siloed way. So we started to dive in to the research, and it was clear that the research evidence suggests that there are associations between multiple risky driving behaviors. And researchers were making recommendations like, we need to address these risky driving behaviors in combination, as these behaviors might be linked by some underlying belief systems. So we did a pretty extensive search to look at what were those factors associated with multiple risky driving behaviors. And we found a variety of factors that were associated with multiple risky driving. Once we reviewed the various factors associated with multiple risky driving, we wanted to clearly be able to see the factors and what the risky behaviors were associated with. So this is a chart that just showed that process of various factors along that left column, and then the risky driving behaviors across the top. So we could start to see where the overlap was, the research evidence was, and we could start to use that information then to inform the design of a brief intervention. We used all of that information we learned, and we developed a brief intervention to reduce multiple risky driving behaviors amongst college students. And the brief intervention focused on a number of different things, but we wanted to meet the person where they were in the process of behavior change. We wanted to explore beliefs related to multiple risky driving behaviors. We wanted to provide strategies to increase safe driving. And we wanted to use strategies that would seek to grow a person's motivation for change. So if you're interested in learning more about this project, the literature review specifically on multiple risky or the design of the intervention, again, that's on our Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund project page, and it will take you to that specific report. We learned a lot in this project, and we were able to offer some recommendations and some guidance that traffic safety professionals could use to make more informed decisions about strategies that might address multiple risky driving behaviors and improve traffic safety. And one of those recommendations was that traffic safety professionals might want to consider providing primary strategies and secondary strategies that mitigate risk or reduce harm when engaging young adults. So primary strategies are those that we do all the time. Don't drink and drive, wear your seatbelt, don't drive distracted. Those are primary strategies. Those are right at the behavior that we want, right? We don't want people to drink and drive. We do want people to wear a seatbelt. We don't want people to drive distracted. We call those primary strategies. Secondary strategies are those that seek to reduce harm and might be more appropriate for people who are resistant to engage in the behavior change or aren't quite ready to engage in the primary strategy that we want. So secondary strategies might be things like choosing not to use your cell phone when you're driving at a high speed, or choosing to wear your seatbelt in dangerous weather conditions like rain or snow or ice. Now, of course, we absolutely would like the person to be ready and willing to engage in the primary strategy. We want them to wear their seatbelt every time. But for those who are resistant to that, it might be an approach to think about how do we reduce risk and harm by also providing options, those secondary strategies. Offering more choices might help us engage young adults, especially those who are hesitant or not willing to fully engage in the protective behavior that we're promoting. Integrating harm reduction strategies alongside primary prevention strategies might also provide us an opportunity to meet people where they are and to reinforce autonomy, which for young adults is a really important, developmental milestone. Further, when we think about emotion, if we're working with a group of people who's highly resistant to the change, maybe coming into the situation with negative emotions already about it, we want to think about how do we come alongside that group? What strategies might we need to, how might we need to change our strategies to meet this group where they are and move them in a direction towards positive, protective changes to avoid, eliciting psychological reactants? We know from research that if we elicit more psychological reactants, it might have the opposite effect on the behavior. It might actually cause people to do the exact opposite of what's being recommended to them. How can we avoid that in our strategies? Further, providing options like harm reduction strategies might allow for a person who's resistant or isn't willing to engage in the behavior all the time an opportunity to move to slow thinking, contemplate their beliefs, contemplate the behavior, and shift those beliefs slightly without requiring them to abandon their beliefs completely or to engage in the protective, in the harm reduction strategy. Often what leads to changing our beliefs is cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is that emotional discomfort resulting from this awareness that we have a belief that is inconsistent with other beliefs that are important to us or behaviors that we engage in. For example, a driver who values safety and believes that that they can drive safely while texting, and then they're involved in a crash. They then start to experience cognitive dissonance, right? They're upset because their belief they have that they drive safe and drive safe while texting is inconsistent with the experience that they just had of being in a crash. That can motivate us to change one or more of our beliefs to remove that perceived contradiction. We like our beliefs and behaviors to be aligned. Offering choices can allow a person to try out a new behavior or commit to a behavior that they might otherwise not commit to because they weren't ready at that point to abandon the beliefs they had. Offering choice can help a person explore their beliefs without abandoning them completely and start to shift those beliefs. That is one recommendation that we learned from this project. But there are a lot of additional recommendations that can be found in that project on Montana Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund site as well. We also created a resource in this project. It's an interactive resource that can help you engage young adults in changing beliefs and growing skills and utilizing really practical strategies to reduce engagement in multiple risky driving behaviors. This resource is interactive and you can augment it to fit your needs. And that's the QR code that will take you to that resource and more information on that project. If our conversation, learning about traffic safety culture, better understanding beliefs and how they influence our behaviors, I'd invite you to reach out to me, reach out to our Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund. It's a group of organizations across the country that are looking at traffic safety culture, really seeking to understand traffic safety culture and strategies to grow a protective traffic safety culture. The work that you do in traffic safety culture is complex, and the challenges that we face do not have any single or simple solutions to them. Getting to zero fatalities and serious injuries, it's complex. It's a complex challenge that requires us to think in new ways, to act in new ways. Growing traffic safety culture, focusing on shared beliefs to shift behaviors, to change those negative consequences, can help us to reach our goals. Growing culture, shared beliefs, it doesn't happen quickly, absolutely. And in fact, it can take a long time. But the good news is that once culture is changed, the changes are likely to be sustained into the future. So I really appreciate spending time with you talking about a positive traffic safety culture and changing beliefs to support safer behaviors. I love to keep this conversation going. I have a lot of interest in this topic. So please reach out to me. And I would love to open it up for conversation, questions, things that you've been thinking about as you're thinking about how do beliefs and the beliefs that how do they focus, how can we focus on shifting those beliefs to support safer traffic safety?
Great. Thanks so much, Carrie. That was wonderful information you provided. There are a lot of great information all kind of packed into one, one presentation. So a few questions have come in on the chat, and I know, Chris, you're allowing folks to unmute. So if you need to elaborate on your question, feel free. So the first one comes from Marcelo. Is there any research on the replacement of a primary strategy by a secondary strategy and the differential in safety outcomes? Are you familiar with any research in that area, Carrie?
Oh, that's such a good question. I wouldn't say it replacement of. I think that's I think it's like I think about it on a continuum. Harm reduction strategies are in a lot of different fields. We use them a lot in like alcohol prevention and things like that. I think they're newer for us to think about in traffic safety. I don't know any specific research that looks at the safety outcomes of starting with a secondary strategy. So I don't have any research off the top of my head. And I think we always want to think about them. Obviously, we want the primary. Like we want people to always wear their seatbelt and always, put their phones away. And so I think it's really thinking about how do we engage with an audience who isn't willing right now to do that, and just to start to plant those seeds to shift to those safer behaviors. And connecting to the beliefs they already have, right? Like they already have, many of us have the belief of getting to our family's home safely. How do we tap into that universal belief that we have and connect it to the behavior that we want in traffic safety? So while I don't have any specific research that you're asking about specifically on outcomes, I think it's always connecting them together and how do we start to shift those beliefs?
Great. Let's see. The next question, is there a timing issue here? Can some behaviors be changed in real time? For example, we believe there's a benefit to train 911 specialists to tell 911 callers to remove a crash out of the roadway, assuming no injuries, to prevent secondary crashes. Is there any research that supports this?
Oh, such a great question. I think, such a great question. I think about, can it happen in real time? Absolutely. I think we can shift beliefs in real time. So I think the answer to that is yes. I don't have specific research that's coming to my mind that's offering or answering your question specifically. But beliefs change. We change beliefs all the time. And some beliefs we have are really held strongly and they're like we hold on very tightly. Other beliefs we don't as much, right? And they can shift quicker and easier. And sometimes it's right in the moment or an experience that happens. So I don't think it has to be like this really long, drawn out process all the time to shift beliefs, but there is, and real-time belief change definitely can happen in the moment. And I think it's also, what beliefs do we hold so tightly and others that we are more malleable at? Some of those tighter beliefs that we hold take longer, right? If we want them to shift.
And obviously, if anyone has any follow-up to Carrie's, feel free to either unmute or type in another question. Let's see, the next one from Tracy. How do you handle messaging using a primary and secondary strategy? How do you balance public outreach using the primary strategy versus the secondary?
Mm-hmm. So I think seatbelts is a really good example of thinking about, we've done a lot in traffic safety to shift seatbelt use, right? We're above 90% in general, where over 90% of us wear a seatbelt all the time. And so we've done amazing things if we look at the strategies that we've used for seatbelts. However, we're not 100%, right? We're not 100%. And so what strategies do we think about that are different or customized slightly differently for a group of people who haven't made that commitment, don't wear their seatbelt all the time? We can't use the same strategy we've used, right? That hasn't worked for this very small group of people who are yet to wear a seatbelt all the time or at all. And so maybe it's not in the maybe it's a different way that we're approaching them. Maybe it's a different strategy that we need to use, that where messaging, this really primary prevention messaging, worked really well. And now we have to think about what strategies are next. What do we need to think about for shifting that are different than what we've used in the past? And so I think when I think about a secondary strategy, it's like, maybe it's not wide scale messaging. Maybe it's conversations with families who can then have conversations. And how do we set those? Maybe it's skill development for, how do I have a conversation with my coworker who's sitting right next to me and we're driving and they're not wearing their seatbelt? Maybe it's, and so thinking about all of those different, maybe it's not a large scale media message, but maybe it's a different strategy that we're building skills to shift from a person who they do listen to and care about and want to have a conversation with. So I know that doesn't maybe answer specifically, but I think about it and what do we need to do now that we've shifted to this, over 90% of us?
And I see Tracy just responded. Thank you. That's great input. Influencing the influencers of the highest risk group. Exactly.
Yeah.
Looks like John had another one. How do we help first responders enhance their safety at crash scenes and change their behaviors? For example, many law enforcement officers don't like to wear reflective traffic safety vests because it's not cool.
Mm-hmm. So such a great question. I always love to think about, and so if you're thinking about a very specific group, first responders or law enforcement or whoever you're thinking about in your work, I always like to start from this place of what are those positive shared beliefs they already have? Because we can always start. Any group of people we are looking at, there are shared protective beliefs that they have. They might also have those risky ones, but we can always start from a place of connecting to where they are and shared values that they already have. So I always think about, how do we connect any behavior change we want to do to what is already working well in the community, in the group that we're focused on, in the, amongst law enforcement or first responder or whoever the group is. Like, what's really going well there already? What beliefs do they already have that are protective? And how do we start from that place? Taking it from starting what's already working and working well and growing those, and connecting in small subtle shifts in beliefs, versus starting with something that's way outside where they are and trying to bring that in. So I always come from a place of like, what's going well? What's working well? What are the beliefs they already have that we can connect this new behavior to?
Suggestion. All right, I think we have one final one here. Oh, I guess another one came in as well. So this is from Thomas or Tom. Has the use of enforcement been studied? And is it a proven to be effective at changing behaviors or beliefs using
Yes.
enforcement?
So I think we have to think about behaviors and strategies across the continuum. So absolutely enforcement can influence behaviors. Yep, it does. And I think about all the things that also can influence behaviors. So I never think about a strategy. It's like the one solution. It's one of many different strategies that we want to think about and implement. So absolutely enforcement can influence and change behavior. But we also want to think about what else works, and what else do we want to have come alongside enforcement that can support safer behaviors and strategies. We can think about, all the E's, enforcement and engineering strategies and behavior strategies, and what are all of those things. We never want to think about, I think, like one specific strategy alone to change behavior, but lots of different strategies to change behavior.
Makes sense. Yeah, try to figure out what works the best for sure with the different strategies.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Beth asks, does this translate to addressing behavior on specific roadways? For example, roadways that have high levels of wildlife crossings leading to crashes and injuries. Does it translate to specific roadways?
Ooh, I think it could translate to specific roadways, because when we think about beliefs, right, we can think about them in like if we are a shared group of people, if we think about them as shared beliefs, right, there is a culture around certain roadways, right? A culture around, how we drive in cities, how we drive in rural areas, how we drive in mountainous areas, and all of those things. So absolutely, I think we can think about shared beliefs in that cultural, within a context, and that absolutely makes a difference. So I think it is understanding what shared beliefs are, what are the behaviors we want to grow in that context, absolutely would translate.
I think that wraps up all of our questions. We have 1 minute left if anybody has anything else they want to ask Carrie. I'm assuming, Carrie, you'd be open to folks reaching out to you if they have follow-up questions at some other point.
Absolutely. Please do. I'd love to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for spending the time and out of your busy days to learn and be together. So thanks a lot.
Great. Yes. And thank you, Carrie, for your presentation and the discussion as well. It was all really great information. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar is part of the work of our Commercial Vehicle Safety Center. So you'll be able to view the slides as well as the recording as well from this webinar, as well as from past webinars we've had as well on our site. And I'll go ahead and drop that into the chat box there for you. So one goal of our center, of course, is to provide resources, assistance to help establish those partnerships between agencies to help improve safety. So feel free to contact me if you'd like any more information.
With that being said, again, Brenda, thank you so much for helping deliver this. And Carrie, thank you for sharing this information. Extremely valuable and insightful too, and kind of thought-provoking with some of the areas too. So we certainly appreciate that. Everybody have a fantastic week. Stay safe and don't forget to be awesome. Thanks, everyone.